Kia ora students, Mr. Black here. You love accounting, but there's a bit of a problem, this accounting equation thing. It's kind of tough. You've got debits, you've got credits. It's all a bit of a mess the first time you learn it. So I thought I'd take a look at the Simplified Accounting Equation, which you can see on screen, take you through what a debit and credit is, and then have a look at an analysis chart so we can apply that knowledge. So this is the simplified version of the accounting equation. You can see it is assets equals liabilities plus owner's equity. And when you look at this equation, you can kind of see that we've got two sides, right? We can separate them by this equal sign down the middle. So on the left side of the accounting equation, we've got assets sitting there on the left. And on the right side, we've got liabilities plus owner's equity. And in accounting, we actually have special names for the left side and the right side of our equation. The left side we call the debit side. We note that by DR. And on the right side we call that the credit side, noted by CR. So we've got assets sitting here on the debit side by themselves, and on the right side we've got liabilities and owner's equity sitting on the credit side. Now, there isn't necessarily a particularly good reason why we call these things. And there isn't like a special way of remembering it. You just have to know that debits are on the left and credits are on the right. But there are things out there to help you remember it, should you need them. Once we've got down that debits on the left and credits on the right, and that assets are debits and liabilities and owner's equity are credits, from there it's a fairly simple case to apply that learning once you've had a bit of practice. Okay, so if we want to increase something, we do the same to it as what it already is, and if we want to decrease something, we do the opposite of whatever it is. So, for example, if I want to increase an asset, I do the same, which is debit. It's already a debit, so the same as debit is debit. So if I want to increase an asset, I do debit. If I want to increase liabilities or owner's equity, I do the same as what they are, so I do a credit. If I want to decrease something, I do the opposite to what it is. So an asset is a debit. If I want to decrease it, I do the opposite, so I do a credit. Liabilities and owner's equity, they are credits. And if I want to decrease them, I have to do the opposite, so I do a debit. Okay, that's probably the hardest part of this whole thing, just remembering that if you want to increase something, you do the same as what it is, and if you want to decrease something, you do the opposite of what it is. So we'll have a little look at an example, and then we'll do some analysis charts. So here's an example for you. Let's do it one step at a time. Let's say, for example, the owner contributes $10,000 to the business. And let's just look at one side of this. Let's just look at bank. So bank is an asset, and we know that assets sit here on the debit side. Now, if we are contributing money into our bank account, that means our bank account is going to increase. So if our bank is an asset, which sits on the left side, and we're increasing it, we want to do the same. So we're going to debit it. Okay, we're going to debit bank by $10,000. You can see that we did the same thing. Debit is a debit. So this is probably a little bit easier for you to understand if we have a look at some examples and go through them together. This is exercise 11. It's in your book on page 19, and I'm just going to go through it now, doing the relevant debits and credits. You can see that on January 1st here, Hamish, the owner, contributes $40,000 cash into the business. Okay, so this thing here is something we call an analysis chart, where we have to put in the date. So we know, for example, that the date for this first transaction is January the 1st. So I'm going to put January the 1st. We know that there are two accounts that are affected. Accounting, we like balance. It's very zen that way. So if we're putting money in, it's going to be bank and capital are going to be two accounts that are affected. So I am going to put in, for my first item, I'm going to put in bank. Okay. Is bank an asset, liability, or owner's equity? Well, bank is an asset. What about increase or decrease? Well, if the owner is contributing cash to the business, that means we are increasing the bank account. I'm just going to put I for increase. Okay, and this is the hard part, right? So bank is an asset that is increasing. So it's an asset, it's on the debit side. If it's increasing, I do the same. So that means I'm going to debit it, DR. How much for? Well, up here it says $40,000 cash. So $40,000 cash. Simple enough. Now, there are always two sides to every transaction. In this one, we know that bank goes up, but we also know that capital goes up because the owner is increasing their investment in the business. So the second side is capital. Capital comes under owner's equity. And if the owner is increasing their investment in the business, that's going to be an increase. So again, we know owner's equity is increasing. So if we go back to our equation here, owner's equity is increasing. So if we increase something, we're doing the same. Owner's equity is on the credit side. So to increase it, we credit it for $40,000. Let's look at one or two more. On January the 2nd, the business purchased some equipment worth $1,000, paying for it with cash. So that's January the 2nd. So I know there are two accounts that are going to be affected here. One of them is going to be equipment. Equipment's going to go up because I'm getting some equipment. And the other one's going to be bank because I'm paying for it. So my bank account's going to go down. So I'm going to start with equipment. Equipment is an asset. And like I said, it's increasing because we're getting more equipment. So if we go over here, assets are on the debit side. If I want to increase something, I do the same. So I'm going to debit that equipment for $1,000. Now, the other side of this is my bank account. Bank is an asset. It's a future economic benefit. My bank account's actually decreasing, though, because I'm paying some money. So this is our first decrease. So let's have a look at this. Bank is an asset. It sits here on the debit side. But if we want to decrease something, we have to do the opposite. So the opposite to a debit is a credit. So I'm going to credit that for $1,000. Let's do one more. On the 3rd, a loan was arranged from the bank worth $21,000. So we're getting a loan from the bank. We're going to put that into our account. So the first one I'm going to do is bank. Bank is an asset. If we're putting money into my bank account, it's increasing. You probably already worked it out. Bank is an asset, so it's on the debit side. If we're doing the same, we increase. So I'm going to debit for that $21,000. The other side of this is a loan, because I'm getting a loan from the bank. Now I'm increasing my obligation. I'm increasing the amount that I owe to the bank. So my liabilities in this case are going to increase, okay, because my obligation is going up. So I've got a liability that sits here. It's on the credit side, and if I want to increase it, I do the same. So I'm going to credit it for $21,000. And that is the basics of the simplified accounting equation, how debits and credits work, and how analysis charts work. You may have noticed a few things here. You may have noticed, for example, that I'm indenting by leaving 2 spaces before I do my credit transactions. You don't need to do that. You don't need to worry about it. It's just a thing that makes things look nice that sometimes accountants do. You may also notice that when I do my 2 transactions, I always do the debit first and then I do the credit after. Again, that is not something that you necessarily are required to do, but if you are sort of finding this quite easy and you want to do that, then that is good practice. Okay, so on your test, you don't have to do it, but if you're finding this quite simple, you can have a go at doing that. Other than that, that's pretty much it. Make sure if you have any questions, ask a teacher or something like that. Until next time, good luck.